So we're here today to talk about the Streamline Thermo II Heatwave system. This one's a horizontal tank version. It usually fits in the side door of most fans. It fits underneath the floor, which is the false floor on a smart tank system. We also do the upright version as well. That's more for the upright tanks. So I just want to run through a couple of features on this unit today. So we have the diagnostic light on the left here, which is a little green light, which we'll cover in another video. We have the hot and the warm setting, which is the temperature setting. We have the power off and the power on switch. And then we have the temperature sensor, which gives you your output of temperature. And then on the top here, we have the coolant tank lid. There's all the features on this tank. So a lot of people ask me, what's the main reason for having the temperature button? The main reason for the temperature button is so that in a very cold day, you can set that to what we say a warm temperature over against a hot temperature in order to bring the temperature down on the actual heat of the water. If you clean glass with boiling hot water on a cold day, there is a risk you could crack that glass, especially single pane glass. The other option is if you're working single-handed, so i.e. a single operator, as this is a dual operator system, you then have the warm setting so that the water is not too hot for your operation. However, if you do have two men or you're working on an extremely dirty environment, be it cladding, be it fascias, be it gutters, definitely we recommend you use the hot setting. This specific vehicle which I'm videoing on is an electric vehicle, full electric vehicle. So in this case, we've installed a separate fuel tank. All fuel tanks separate to the unit must be installed above the height of the heater. But most vehicles, I'd say if 95–96% of the vehicles which we install heatwaves into, we tap into the fuel tank on the van. That makes the requirement for fuel for the heater a lot easier to manage because you can just go off the fuel gauge. So to start this unit up, we'd recommend that you start the engine of the van first. The reason for this is because these heaters draw a lot of power when they first start up, because what happens is the burner has to ignite the fuel, so therefore it's going to glow red hot, ignite the fuel, and then the initial startup it draws incredibly amount of amperage on the battery. If you have a supercharged relay system, which we recommend, connected to the battery, you can replace that power in the battery at the same time that it draws it out to ensure that the heater fires up correctly when it first starts up. The heater always goes through a setup procedure, so it'll check to make sure you've got enough battery voltage, check that it can exhaust the air which it takes in, it will check that there's enough fuel in the fuel line to start up, and then once it's done its full checks, it will start up. If any of those features are interrupted by anything, it will go through, it'll show on the fault code, which will come to in another video. So with the engine running, you then switch on. The red light will come on. You will then get a solid green light on this one, and you'll hear the unit starting to fire up. We always recommend you leave that running for at least 5 or 10 minutes when it initial startup. This could be the time you drive to your first job. In that time, by the time you get to your first job, the heater is warmed up and ready for working. When you get to your job, you can then decide, do you need the hot function today or do you need the warm function today? Set it accordingly as we discussed. Bear in mind, please factor in that you will lose a bit of heat when the hose pipe runs along the floor to your pole. Once the unit's running, let it run all day, just leave it on. Don't switch it off between jobs. Because what will happen is when you switch it off between jobs, it will then get to do the startup process every time. That draws a lot of power out of the battery and also is downtime, where you could be using that for more efficient use of the fuel. Roughly, these units would run on about half a litre of diesel per hour. So roughly on a working week, we say on average it will cost you roughly between £25 to £50 per month to run. The return on that to clean with hot water is far more. When you finish for the day, that's when you switch your unit off. What we recommend is, if you have a thermostat controller, don't switch it off on the switch here, switch it off on the thermostat. However, if you don't have a thermostat controller, just simply switch the button off and lever unit. That's it for me today.